'Tis I, your old pal King Chuck, and this is the Sunday sermon. How you doing? Yes, where I stand at my imaginary pulpit, which is a undisclosed park in the middle of nowhere. Kind of not really in the middle of nowhere, but I'll just say that we're just down the street from several churches, and I think I'm the lesser of all the evils. How about that? So this has been a big week in the world of politics. On Tuesday was a big comeback. When we think of comebacks, we think of the world of sports. People like, the Red Sox and the Cubs. People were like, they will never win a World Series ever again. They'll always be the laughingstock of sports. And what do you know? Big comeback. They both won the World Series. Ditto with the Red Wings. They were called the Dead Wings for many, many years. And they won the Stanley Cup back in '96. And they won many of them. And it just goes on and on. Movies. John Travolta, was the darling of Hollywood because of Saturday Night Fever and Grease, Urban Cowboy. And then all of a sudden, every movie he made was really bad for about 15 years or so. And then it happened. He appeared in a little movie called Pulp Fiction, and he was well lauded for his role. The movie was a blockbuster. It was well lauded at the box office. He had a great supporting cast. Uma Thurman, of course, Samuel L. Jackson. Can't forget him. It would be a sin to forget good old Samuel L. But then you had, of course, unfortunately his star has fallen once again because he did that horrible movie Battlefield Earth, and that movie was basically a love letter to his fake little comic book religion. So, anyway, and of course, television. One of my favorite comeback stories was Jack Barry. Jack Barry and Dan Enright. So, Barry and Enright, they were the folks behind the show 21, and it turned out that the show was rigged. They had a Jewish guy win all the games, and the sponsors and the networks and the affiliates were not happy, so they decided to give all the answers to a white guy. He started to win, and then the guy admitted that he got all the answers from Enright. So as a result, Barry and Enright was forced to cease production of anything for over a decade. But of course, then what happened was Jack Barry, then what they did was they developed this new show called The Joker's Wild. They actually tried to sell it to Mark Goodson and Bill Todman. They did a pilot with Alan Ludden, who was from Password, and it sat in development hell for a few years. And then in '72, CBS debuted that show along with Gambit, starring Wink Martindale. And then there was a little game show that very few people heard of. Yeah, it's been well forgotten into the depths of television history. It was a little game show called The Price is Right. And it was hosted by some guy named Bob Barker. I wonder what happened to him. Anyway, yes, I am just joshing you. And The Joker's Wild was a huge hit. The show went on to air, was on CBS for 3 more years. Then it became a hit in syndication. And, of course, Barry and Enright also developed other game shows. They brought back Tic-Tac-Dough, which was a show they came up with in the 50s, and the original version was from the 50s. And then they brought Wink Martindale, the aforementioned Wink Martindale to host this new version, and it became a hit in syndication as well. And anyway, so the rest of the story was they did not allow this blacklisting to kill them. I mean, and now, and of course, music. Neil Sedaka was a hit singer and songwriter in the 60s. Calendar Girl, Breaking Up Is Hard to Do. Then he disappeared because he turned out to be a real square. And then the 70s, he recorded a song called Love Will Keep Us Together. The Captain's Neil picked it up, and of course, if you listen toward the end of the record, Tony Teal sang Sedaka is back. And the basic lesson was, just because you get canceled out, just because, your good days are behind you, or at least you think about it, guess what? It ain't. And guess who made a big comeback on Tuesday? Democracy. Dr. Abdul El-Sayed beat the odds. His opponent, Hailey Stevens, outspent him through AIPAC, which is, of course, the Israeli organization that wants pro-Israel candidates. And then he got, and she got the support of corporate Democrats like Governor Whitmer, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, even Dana Nessel, our AG here in Michigan, who is probably one of the more progressive members of the Michigan government. She endorsed Hailey Stevens. And I was shocked and I was angered. And Gary Peters endorsed her as well. And guess what happened at the end of the day? Hailey get this, Abdul El-Sayed won for a reason. People are fed up with the Democratic Party being a milquetoast party. People should not have to vote for the Democrats just because they hate the Republicans. And now, Mike Rogers, who is, of course, Abdul's opponent, this is what they do. This is what this guy does. He attacks him just because of his name. And the Republicans, they like to use his entire name to make it sound like he's a terrorist. Same shit they pulled with Barack Obama. Barack Hussein Obama. Oh, his name sounds like a terrorist name. He's nasty. He's disgusting. We can't have him. And Barack was one of the best presidents in my lifetime. I mean, the Affordable Care Act helped millions of Americans. He was the last president to raise the minimum wage. The only problem he had was that he wanted to sound like a progressive, but he was just a centralist. Of course, not to mention the fact that Hailey Stevens was in his cabinet to help rebuild Detroit, basically, the automobile industry. And bear in mind, Obama did not even endorse Hailey Stevens. I was watching Dr. Abdul's interview this morning on Meet the Press, and he had a conversation on the phone with President Obama, and he kept it brief, and he basically, it's like he basically says that he was so happy that he won, and I agree. We all should be happy. that we actually have a true progressive who wants to make universal health care a reality and to stop spending so much money on this terrible war in Iran. You know, that's what we need, folks, to get the fuck out of Iran. Gas prices are still astronomically high. You know, it's $3.99 a gallon right now in Grand Rapids. And it's going to get worse. I mean, gas prices, you know, shot to $4.49 last week. And, you know, gradually it went down a little bit here and there. I mean, Speedway is usually the first gas station in town to jack up the prices. Yeah, Speedway has always been a joke here in Grand Rapids because they've always been the cheaper guy in town. But so that's their reputation. But now, you know, we got alternatives out there like Casey's and, of course, Costco. Even though I've noticed that fewer and fewer people are going to get Costco gas these days, which is kind of too bad considering that they are usually the cheaper guy in town. But what else is happening too is, you know, you got Gas Buddy. People are, you know, sometimes there's cheaper gas stations in other parts of the town. You know, of course, Upside is another app people use. But it is what it is. Now, I want to tell you a little story. So on Wednesdays, I have a tradition. And that tradition is I go see my mother. And after I leave her place at 6 o'clock, I turn my radio to AM 590 of Kalamazoo. And I listen to a little bit of the little weasel known as Mark Levin. Yes, good old Mark Levin, his nightly shit show that he has every night at 6 o'clock, sharp every evening. Of course, some stations will adjust the time slot a little bit due to sports or due to other programming. But Mark Levin began his show by simply saying that the majority of the people who voted for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed were all the Muslims in Detroit. And Hailey Stevens mostly got union members and white folks and people in northern Michigan, stuff like that. And I'm like, so basically what he said was, Mike Rogers has nothing to worry about. And I'm like, yeah, he does. Because right now we have a president who is immensely unpopular. Many people who fought for him in the MAGA movement, they're quitting. They have left MAGA once and for all due to the fact that they don't like the inflation that he has thrown onto the American people. I mean, we were recovering from his first term. And Biden, you know, President Biden, who I'm sorry to say, his cancer, according to his son Hunter, his cancer has worsened. You know, he's been fighting prostate cancer, and it now has spread to his bones, sadly, and he's living in immense pain. But anyway, Biden did a brilliant job, in my opinion, of boosting the economy. He was one of the more progressive presidents in my lifetime. And, you know, he was a friend to the unions. And one important thing was that right when he was on the campaign trail, he went to Hot Springs, which was where FDR went to rehabilitate his polio. There we go. He had, you know, he lived, you know, he basically lived his life in a wheelchair. And sadly, he lived his life in pain. But despite all this, he created all these programs that benefited everybody in the American, you know, all the American people. But here's the thing, folks. Virtually every Democrat president since Biden, I mean, not since Biden, but since FDR has been a sellout. And tragically, one of those people was Bill Clinton. And one of the things that Bill Clinton did was pass this really shitty law called the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which basically told broadcasters that, smaller broadcasters, now is the time to sell. Because guess what's going to happen? These bigger guys have a lot of money and they want to buy you out. And they did. And some of the smaller broadcasters who sold their stations and got out of the business turned out to be very intelligent people, because these bigger broadcasters ran their stations into the ground. And now a lot of these broadcasters are hurting. So here's the story. Mark Levin. I love it. I love pronouncing his name like that way. Mark Levin, this past week, so on his little shit show, he decided to tell everyone, while he was bashing Abdul El-Sayed, this is what happens. He decides his company, the company that owns his radio show and produces it, Cumulus Media, laid off a ton of their DJs. As a matter of fact, here in Grand Rapids, Jordan Lasp, who was the afternoon guy at WLAV, he was also the assistant programming director. He also helped to program WKLQ, which is, when I moved here to Grand Rapids, it was a kick-ass rock station. Now it's a wimpy adult alternative station called The Q. And it's hard to tell how many people listen to The Q. I don't think it's a lot of people, because Cumulus right now, they're in deep financial trouble, and they're in the middle of a huge lawsuit against Nielsen. So it's hard. So anyway, as it was, Jordan was let go. Over in Detroit, Dave Fuller from 96.3 WDVD was let go. And how ironic that another person who was let go worked at 96.3 35 years ago. His name was McConnell Adams, the man at large, as he was known as. He worked at a station in Little Rock, Arkansas, He was let go. He was fired from, so the story was back in 94, 96.3 WHYT, they were top 40, and in 94 they flipped to alternative as Planet 96.3, and ultimately I think he was let go because he no longer fit the station's image. Of course, he was black, and now they wanted to have the station be as white as possible. So that's kind of what happened. And anyway, what happened was Planet 96.3 was alternative, and and what happened was man at large moved to Northern Michigan for a while and worked at 106.7 The Peak. A lot of former folks from WHYT ended up at The Peak. And then I told you the sad story about how The Peak became this crappy AC station, and now it's pretty much also ran in the ratings as a country station called Star FM. So anyway, the point is, folks, is that but yeah, and it's not all. In the television side of things, Scripps Media let go of a lot of folks. Scripps owns Fox 17 here in Grand Rapids. Kevin Craig, longtime meteorologist at Channel 17, was let go. And he wrote a very scathing review of Scripps on his Facebook page. And folks, I've heard nothing but bad things about the Scripps company. It is a company that doesn't really take very good care of their workers. And, you know, and it's not just Scripps, it's not just Cumulus. Of course, it's iHeartMedia. They let go of a lot of folks too. This past week, Cumulus decided to cancel the license of AM 560 in San Francisco. That was the old KSFO. KSFO, by the way, they moved it to 8:10 a.m., which used to be KGO radio. They basically abandoned those call letters. Now it's still in Channel 7. It's owned by Disney, ABC. And, radio is changing. And, and just think, 40 years ago when Reagan got rid of the Fairness Doctrine, which paved the way for Limbaugh and Mark Levin and Sean Hannity, it was a quick fix because AM radio dominated back in the mid-20th century. And then what happened was everyone migrated to FM for music. AM had no purpose except for talk radio. And AM brought out the worst in people. And Limbaugh was a man of hate. He said some of the most dumbest things out there, and one of them killed him. He actually believed that smoking cigarettes actually helped people, and it was lung cancer that killed him. He died from lung cancer. He was always seen with, around a big fat cigar. And the point is, folks, is that it was not a long-term fix. It helped radio for 30 years, and then when Limbaugh died and all these other folks died too. I look at talk radio from like 1999. The WTCM schedule up in Traverse City. They had Limbaugh, who's dead. G. Gordon Liddy, who's dead. Bruce Williams, dead. Jim Bohannon, dead. Art Bell, dead. And the only person who was on the WTCM schedule from 1999 who's still with us, fucking Dr. Laura. Stupid cunt. Biggest cunt female radio talk show host in history. Oh, there's no such, homosexuality is a biological error. And yet she spread her legs in front of a camera back in the 70s. Ay vey. And it's going to get worse. This past week, Brandon Carr and his FCC passed a law. It used to be that companies could only own 39% of all the TV markets in America. Now it's infinite. Case-by-case basis. That's right. And the reason being is because Nexstar is trying to buy Tegna, which means that the combined company will own Wood TV8 here in Grand Rapids, which is NBC, and the two ABCs, WZZM 13 Grand Rapids and WOTV 41 in Battle Creek. Of course, I told you the story. Why does the West Michigan television market have two separate ABC stations? I told you the story. It was because of how televisions worked back then. And a lot of it was because back in olden days, nobody wanted to be on UHF. And because Grand Rapids was so close to both Detroit and Lansing and Flint and Tri-Cities and Chicago even, the FCC only gave this area 2 slots on the VHF band, 3 and 8. And they gave So this is what happened. I told you the story before. Channel 3 was owned by John Fetzer. And what happened was Fetzer owned Channel 13, WWTV, up in Cadillac. Well, WWTV studio burnt to the ground. So Fetzer fetched a bone to a group of Grand Rapids investors. So they worked with the FCC to figure out that they could the Channel 13 in Cadillac could move to Channel 9 because they're not really close to other markets other than Green Bay, Wisconsin. And it worked out. They moved to Channel 9. They became a powerful station. And of course, eventually, when in '64, when they passed that's what the FCC did. They allowed the UHF band to be sold on all TV sets. They forced all TV sets to have UHF. And that allowed for Channel 29 to sign on in '71. So now we had all 3 networks. But now the question is, will 13 and 41 merge? But here's another question. Is Channel 13's days of newscasts coming to an end if 13 and 8 merge? And as it is, ever since Susan Shaw retired several months ago, Brian Sterling has been doing a lot of nights at Wood TV 8, anchoring all the newscasts by himself. He would love to free up his voice a little bit, not have to talk for 90 minutes straight. But that's the thing, folks. You see, after everything's all said and done, yes, Channel 8, I know they've been dominating the reins for years. Channel 3, of course, will have the Kalamazoo people. Of course, there have been rumors that Channel 3's owners, which is Sinclair, they're looking to buy Scripps Media television division, which will be a bad decision because Sinclair is a very conservative company. And what will happen is it will, the legacy media will work itself more and more and more into being a media that will be more regime media. I mean, as it is, Sinclair is regime media, in my opinion. Nexstar is borderline. I really don't have much of an opinion of Scripps. I don't watch Fox 17 News very often. Tegna, now, I'm not a fan of Channel 13. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a big fan of 13, never have been. I do remember Lee Vandermeed, who was Juliet Dragus' sidekick for many, many years for the evening newscasts. Lee was actually a right-wing asshole. And the only positive thing I can say about him is that he died a few years ago. He died from a rare disease. I remember that. But Juliet reminds me, and this is going to be a little wicked, I know. She reminds me too much of a woman I used to work with in northern Michigan who was a total Jesus freak. She sounded like her. And that, a cross between her and Terry Ray from WKLT in northern Michigan. And I'm not saying this in a nice and positive way either, because I fucking hate Terry Ray. I know some people in the rock business in northern Michigan have said that they knew Terry, and she is one of the sweetest and kindest people out there. I beg to differ. And I'll get to why in a second. So, you see, folks, I want to tell you a sad story. You see, my elderly dad lives with me. He's 74 years old. And a few nights ago, we were watching Fox News. And, when I got home, there was some blonde bimbo on TV who said, that more and more young people are going towards the Democratic Party, or as they call it, the Democrat Party. They don't like to call it Democratic at all, because they're very racist. They don't care about history. They basically get their history lessons from assholes in a tinfoil cap. I mean, that's the way they operate, obviously. So this is the story. This cunt had the audacity to say that more and more young people, millennials and Gen Z people, are becoming Democrats because they were spoiled growing up. But here's the story. That's not why I'm a Democrat, folks. I was the opposite growing up. You see, when I was a kid growing up, first of all, all my cousins grew up in Detroit, either Detroit or Grand Rapids. And they had everything. They could go to movies whenever they wanted. They could go to rock shows if they wanted. Traverse City was very anti-new rock. And that's that's the big reason why I hate Terry Ray. Terry Ray was basically the Pied Piper of baby boomer rock in northern Michigan. For obvious reasons, I like to call her the Barry Weiss of rock music. So here's the story. I didn't have the cool radio stations. I didn't have the cool this or the cool that. I didn't have many friends to begin with. And after my mom and dad divorced, I found myself in a boat many times with just one paddle that just swung me around and around. The whole world made it look like it was my fault that I wasn't really achieving anything. And it was all because I got stuck with parents who grew up in Detroit, who had a lot growing up, who had friends, who had, could do whatever they wanted to do. But here's the thing. I couldn't do hardly anything because of where I lived. I want to tell you a sad story, folks. My cousin has a really intelligent son. And he's been very supportive of him. One of the things that my cousin's son does is that he bowls. He is a bowler. He is a great bowler. He goes bowling. It's like he will whip. This kid is 15 years old and he will whip your ass. When I was right around my cousin's son's age, I hung out with a bunch of guys, so my mother knew that I wanted a group of people to hang out with. So there were some guys that she hung out with at work, and she worked at a small shithole town called Mansalona. And way up in northern Michigan, very boring city, sadly. So one day, these guys, who were all 21, took me to a bowling alley where I had to be 21 to bowl. And anyway, the story was I sat there, watched everyone bowl, and the only time I was worth anything was, hey, Chuck, can you go out to my car and grab my cigs? Oh, Chuck, I need my purse. I left it in the car. And it was sleet outside. Cold sleet. And so I said, okay, guys, it's getting late. I'm going home. Bye. And, and it happened at my employer. So I washed dishes for this restaurant as a teenager. And the restaurant in 1999 turned 25 years old. And they had a karaoke night to celebrate. And so I submitted a few songs. And I sat there for a few hours, and several of my coworkers got to go up on stage first. And even I had a cousin who worked there, and he was not 21 yet. So this is what happens. I was told, well, you're not 21, so we gotta, I'm sorry, we should have told you. It was 12:30 at night when I was so mad. I look back and I wish I could have knocked shit over. But I didn't, because it was a different time and different place. I had no choice but to kiss my boss's ass, because, it was a time where if you knock your boss for whatever reason, you're not going to get anywhere in life. And this woman made me work when I was 16, 17 years old with a child molester. That's right. This asshole couldn't get a job anywhere in our town. So guess where she ended up? Where he ended up, working with me. Yeah, by the way, that restaurant, which was Vasquez Hacienda, has long since gone out of business. They went out of business in 2019, excuse me. And the reason why was because the owners, Elaine, who was the owner, was having health issues. And the kids didn't want it. And as it was, the restaurant had very low Yelp scores. People were saying that Taco Bell tasted better. And, the last time I was there, it was Harbor Days night, 2019. It was like 5 o'clock at night, and it was dead. Golf was playing on the TV. Most of the people in the restaurant looked like they would be dead within a year or two. It was like being in a nursing home. 50s music playing in the background. That restaurant, it's like if you go to a Mexican restaurant, you want to listen to like Mexican music. And have just a festive atmosphere. And it lacked it. Anyway, I'll be honest with you. I saw Elaine recently at a family function in northern Michigan. And I did not, as soon as I laid my eyes on her, I ran the hell out of there. I was afraid I was going to tell her, fuck you for making me work with that sicko. Ron Henry. I don't care if people are going to be like, well, Ron Henry, he's just mentally handicapped and yeah, as a matter of fact, he worked at the Village Market in Elk Rapids, and he would put product on the shelf backward. And he got fired for that because he was so goddamn stupid. He was incapable of having a supermarket job, and yet they put him next to me. And there were times that, looking back, I think he copped a feel on me a few times. He was sick. But folks, Northern Michigan loved spreading the message to teenagers that you were not worth jack shit. Look at what happened last year with that big stabbing at the Walmart in Traverse City. Allegedly, the stabber was a young guy from Pellston up by Petoskey, and Pellston didn't have a lot to do for teens. And according to a girl who claimed that she knew him growing up, she said that Every day at lunch, all the kids would just hang out at the old IGA store and get drunk and smoke pot. Because that's the only thing to do in town for teens. And the reason why he ended up in his state was because he smoked some pot that was laced with something, and before he knew it, he was in a hospital in Grand Rapids. And he ended up with mental troubles throughout his life. But here's the story with Elk Rapids. Unfortunately, a few years ago, I was on Facebook, and what had happened was there was somebody made a message and said there's really nothing for young people to do in northern Michigan. So this is what happened. Some old biddy said kids should go to New Hope Church. They will help. They give kids an opportunity to be themselves and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. Here we go again. Come. Yeah, my dogs. Yeah, I'm at a section of the park that doesn't have a little doggy cup or anything. I should have brought one with me. I told you the story with New Hope, folks. They love to tell young people, sex is bad for you. And you shouldn't even think about sex until you're married. And you shouldn't look at porn. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't have fun. Blah, blah, blah. And the asshole preacher who told us all that, John Clark, I told you the story. He committed suicide after he was caught stealing $500,000 from the ministry that he and his whore of a wife started. Michelle, by the way. Michelle Clark, who, by the way, now is back at New Hope. Yeah, I guess she's in charge of a women's ministry there. So let me explain this to you. The megachurch culture hurts more than helps. And I wish I never went to New Hope. When I was a kid growing up, I saw how Republican that area is. And that's the problem. I've studied Republicans throughout my life. They've all been about, the basic lesson is, if one teen is bad, they're all bad. And they were all about creating stupid laws that would basically force us to stay home and do nothing. Folks, as it was, I pretty much spent my teenage years in front of a television set because there was nothing to do. And, my father would even come to me and scream at me, saying I need to make friends. I wanted to tell him, this is your goddamn fault because you made me live up here. And his solution to everything was to be with people I didn't feel comfortable around. And there were plenty of those people. Ditto with my mom. I told you the story. She made me go to hang out with this fat bitch that I was very uncomfortable with. I mean, she was a tongue talker. She lived in a trailer. The whole family was very fucked up. This is why, folks, I started going to strip clubs when I was a young adult. And I'd rather go to Deja Vu than to go to a regular bar in Grand Rapids where, they expect you to drink to the point where you're too drunk to do shit. And, hell, I was pulled over once. But thankfully, the cop, saw that I passed the sobriety test with flying colors. Thank God. Yeah, fuck my cousin for drinking me under the table. But the point is, folks, is that I hate the fact that I look back into my teenage years and I could have done more. And it all was because I got stuck with people who didn't like me or people I didn't like in return. I got stuck with a father who didn't want me to go to Detroit to do fun shit. You know, hell, I think I even made more friends when I was in high school. Well, actually after high school than I did in high school. And and not only that, 1 second please. I had to grab a little drink of water. So this is the story. I looked at the Republicans as oppressors. They loved to tell people like me and you can't have this, but you can have this. And I know it's not what you want, but it's what I want. But then I looked further into the Democrats, and people like Michael Moore woke me up, because I was very young when Bill Clinton was president. And I actually kind of liked Bill Clinton when I was a kid growing up. And Bill, unfortunately, made some bad decisions. Telecom 96 was one of them. He didn't do much to help, the American worker. Come. Yeah, my dog wants to go into the ladies' room. Yeah, she can go in there, but I can't. But you see, folks, we have seen the Democratic Party kick themselves in the ass too many times in the last 10 years. Instead of Bernie Sanders, we get Hillary Clinton. And Hillary wasn't even the top nominee. It was Bernie. But people like, as we've learned with WikiLeaks, people like Deborah Wasserman Schultz, they stood up and told people like me and you, we're going to keep this party as moderate as possible because we want insurance companies to stay in business. And we want to work with the insurance companies to create solutions that will help some people. Yeah. Oh, and we also have billionaire donors. We don't want to see them lose their money. I know, folks, I've seen who the real leaders of the Democratic Party are. Bernie Sanders, AOC, and now Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. Trixie, you're not going in there. Come on. Come. Yeah. I think, I was there in the bathroom with her a few weeks ago, and the guy said, there was a worker who said, you're supposed to be in and out, and that's it. But that's the point, folks. You see, I learned that yes, the Republicans suck. They've always sucked. But the Democrats are now becoming have been Republican light for too long, like Bill Clinton. And, and look at what's happened. Too many billionaires hardly pay a dime in taxes. Some don't pay shit at all. We got people who are struggling with health care, buying groceries, keeping a roof over their head. And the problem is that for the last 10 years, we have not been given a choice of who we want as the president of the United States, at least the Democrats. But the Republicans have gone full MAGA. And look at what's happened. Hell, I love Chipotle. I love Mexican food. I'm scared to go there now. I'm scared that I'm going to eat a nice, healthy burrito that's supposed to be very healthy and good for you, and I'll be on the toilet for 12 hours. I don't want that. And it's all because, people like Elon Musk have doged the shit out of our government. And folks, we need more government, not less. We need a government that will take care of people and watch and make sure that the food we eat is actually fucking healthy. We need healthy food, folks. We can't, nobody should ever be afraid to go to Chipotle or Taco Bell. I don't want to eat something and then a few moments later, here I am on the shitter. It's happened to me before. But the point is, Americans deserve much better. Americans need a president who cares about me or you and everyone else. And to tell, and folks, I'm glad that that I elected Abdul El-Sayed, and I'll vote for him in the general election. Because, hell, look at what's going on with Texas. They got their Republican nominee for senator. You got Ken Paxton, who calls himself a Christian. He is an adulterer. He is a crook. He is a friend to the pedophiles. And yet he thinks he's in line to go to heaven because he got porn websites blocked in his home state. And now he's trying to sue some of them, saying that they market their content towards children. Folks, I've been looking at adult content. I've been looking at internet porn since I was a teenager. Guess how many women I've raped? 0. Guess how many Guess how many times I've walked up to a woman and grabbed her? 0. Guess how many times I've hit on underage kids? 0. I am not a creep. And yet some people think I am because once in a while I go to a strip club. But that's the price you gotta pay if you're neurodivergent like me and women don't like you. Especially in this shithole town like Grand Rapids where, you go to a dating site and you got a bunch of women who put the words, I put Jesus first and foremost in my life. And I'm like, okay, good for you. Glad that you're brain damaged by the mega church that you go to. But folks, we need to take our country back. We do not want to be run by frauds. We've had enough of Donald Trump and his rhetoric. I'm tired of a government that lies to you. I'm tired of having a government that, only cares about war. And, even Donald Trump, he's proven to the world how bad he is when it comes to the economy. Hell, our troops don't even have munitions. And I'll bet you that more and more people will be killed because they ain't got nothing. Our military ain't shit because of what Trump did. Anyway, so other elections, of course, also this fall here in Michigan, it's going to be either Jocelyn Benson, Democrat, versus John James, who is the MAGA Republican. Perry Johnson, of course, was also running for Republican president, and he was just old and crooked. And so anyway, that will happen. Other progressives who won included Lily Chain Schutling. She's running for, I think, state senator. Yeah, she, or local, I forgot what she's running for, but she won her election. Also, I'm really happy to say this. Robert S. Womack lost his election too. He lost to a preacher's wife, actually. And I've told you the story about Robert. He is, of course, the butt buddy of Tyrone Bynum. Tyrone, of course, is the guy who runs, who now owns that crappy radio station that used to be Public Reality Radio, WPRR. So far, he is on his best behavior, both 1680 and 102.5R simulcasting. Only time will tell when Tyrone will pull the plug once again because of fights he has with the power company. So only time will tell of what will happen. So all I have to say about that is, just 80 some odd days until the general election, and I will vote for all my Democrats. We need to tell Donald Trump, knock it off. All right, folks, I gotta get going. So I'll talk to you later. Good day and good luck. Have a good week, everybody.